What if someone built the perfect world and everything inside it still died? Not from hunger, not from disease, not from any threat you could see coming or name on a report. A world where the food never ran out, the water never stopped flowing, the temperature never dropped, and not a single predator ever existed. A world engineered from the ground up to eliminate every hardship a living creature could face. And what if that world collapsed anyway, every single time? This is the story of an experiment that was run 25 times and failed 25 times in exactly the same way. And the reason it failed is something that should make every person living in the modern world stop and think very carefully about the life they are living right now. John B. Calhoun spent the better part of 2 decades trying to answer a question that almost no one else was asking. He was not interested in disease. He was not interested in predators or scarcity or any of the usual threats scientists spent their careers studying. He wanted to know what happens to a civilization when every one of those threats is removed. What happens to living creatures when nothing is hard anymore? He had been running variations of the same experiment since the late 1940s, sealed environments for rats and mice, forests, barns, laboratory rooms. In every version, he gave the animals unlimited food, unlimited water, stable temperatures, and complete protection from the outside world. And in every single version, the colony followed the same arc. The population exploded, the social structure collapsed, reproduction stopped, and the animals died out. He had watched it happen 24 times across nearly 2 decades of research. His critics always had a response. The conditions were not perfect enough, there were hidden stressors, the design had flaws. So in 1968, Calhoun decided to remove every possible objection at once. He built Universe 25 inside a federal research facility in Maryland, a 9-foot square enclosure with stacked apartments along every wall, wire mesh tunnels connecting every level, feeding stations that staff were required to keep full at all times, and water supplies checked by hand on a daily schedule. The space was designed to hold nearly 4,000 mice comfortably. He selected 8 animals, the healthiest specimens from an entire breeding colony, placed them inside, and closed the lid. For the first 100 days, the colony looked like exactly what it was supposed to be, a small, functional society getting started. The mice explored the enclosure, established sleeping positions, sorted out territories, and settled into a calm routine. Then the first litters arrived, and the population began to double every 55 days. Within 10 months, more than 600 animals were living inside the enclosure. The apartments filled, the ramps crowded, the tunnels became rivers of movement, and right at that moment, the fracture began. In nature, when a population outgrows its territory, the surplus animals leave. They disperse, find new land, and start over somewhere else. Inside Universe 25, there was no somewhere else. The young males who arrived too late to claim any meaningful role found that every position worth holding was already taken. They had no territory to defend, no females to court through the rituals their species had always used, no place in the structure of the colony at all. 2 groups formed from this displaced generation, and they could not have looked more different from each other. The first group simply stopped. They drifted into the open center of the enclosure and formed slow, motionless clusters of bodies. They were healthy. They were well fed. They had no physical reason to behave the way they did, but they had nothing to do and no role to occupy. And something inside them responded to that absence by shutting down entirely. When other mice attacked them, they did not fight back. They absorbed it, stood up, walked a few steps, and lay back down. The second group swung in the opposite direction. They became frantic and erratic, forcing themselves into occupied nests, ignoring every social ritual the rest of the colony still followed, moving through the enclosure with a restless aggression that had no clear target and no clear purpose. One group had completely withdrawn. The other had completely unraveled. Both had lost the same thing. The females who could not secure stable positions withdrew to the highest apartments in the enclosure and stayed there, alone and completely disengaged from everything happening below them. The mothers who were still trying to raise young found themselves doing it entirely without support because the males who had originally held territory were wearing down under the constant pressure of the overcrowded enclosure and were abandoning their protective roles one by one. A nursing mother who also has to defend her nest alone is a mother pushed past what she can hold. They began leaving their pups mid-birth, scattered across the enclosure floor. Some stopped recognizing their own offspring. In the worst sections of the colony, fewer than 1 in 20 newborns survived long enough to be weaned. The pups that did survive grew up without any functional model of what a normal life inside this world looked like. No roles to inherit, no territory waiting for them, no structure to grow into. They reached adulthood and became the strangest animals Calhoun had ever recorded. They did not fight, they did not mate. They showed no interest in any social behavior at all. They ate, they slept, and they groomed themselves with obsessive precision. Their fur was perfect because they never got into a single confrontation. They moved through a colony full of living creatures as though nothing else in the room existed. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. They were the most physically pristine animals in the entire enclosure, and they were also the last generation Universe 25 would ever produce. The population peaked at 2,200 mice on day 560 and never rose again. The last recorded pregnancy in the enclosure occurred on day 920. After that, no new mice were born. The beautiful ones groomed themselves. The isolated females sat in their high apartments. The remaining animals aged with nothing coming up behind them, and in May of 1973, the last mouse in Universe 25 died. 4 years and 10 months after 8 animals had been placed into a perfect world. When the study was published, the world immediately reached for the simple reading: comfort kills, abundance destroys, a life without struggle collapses into nothing. That interpretation spread everywhere, and it is still repeated today. But it is not what Calhoun actually concluded. His real finding was more specific and far more unsettling. The colony did not die because life was easy. It died because the number of meaningful roles the environment could offer could not keep pace with the number of animals alive to fill them. When the roles ran out, the mice with no place to occupy stopped functioning, not because they were lazy or weak or broken, but because the structure that gives behavior its reason to exist had quietly dissolved around them. The food never ran out. The water never ran out. What disappeared was the one thing Calhoun had never thought to build into the paradise in the first place: a reason to be in it. Calhoun spent the rest of his career not predicting collapse, but trying to prevent one. He kept building new environments and changing the variables. He believed that as physical space fills up and existing roles disappear, the only path forward is the deliberate creation of new ones, new problems worth solving, new structures for people to inhabit. He called it the expansion of conceptual space, and he believed it was the one thing that separated us from the mice. The mice could not invent new roles when the old ones ran out. The question he left open was whether we can. The experiment ended in 1973. The data has not changed.